Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Cultured Pull List. This week, we will be talking about the crossover mini-series Predator versus Wolverine. And without further ado, let's get into it. Hello, everyone. Hello, all of my fellow comic book fans. Hope you're all doing well. I am your host, Mike, and today we're going to be talking about some comic news that's come out recently, but the main focus is going to be on Predator versus Wolverine, this really cool Marvel crossover series that came out last year. I've been wanting to cover it for a while, but just haven't gotten around to it, but here we are today, recovering it. So let's just jump right into some of this news and then get into the meat of this episode here. So, first off, there's been some announcements from both Marvel and DC. A lot of it's been coming out of New York Comic Con that's going on this weekend. But the first thing is kind of like, I don't know, it's not really anything I'm that interested in, if I'm being perfectly honest with you, but DC has announced something called DC Go, I believe. Yeah, DC Comics Go, and it's going to be exclusively on the DC Universe Infinite app. Basically, it's going to be these comics, a bunch of new exclusive ones that are purposefully designed for mobile use, and they're basically like mobile web comics, I guess is the idea. But there's going to be a lot of new exclusive ones, but then there's going to be some others, like they're reformatting Batman Hush to work with their DC Go platform, and I guess these comics are releasing weekly. So some of the new series are coming out with Harley Quinn in Paradise. This is going to be a romance comedy. These are all going to have like different genres as well. There's going to be Nothing But Nightwing, but it's spelled Butt, and it's going to be an action comedy. A lot of these seem like very light, comedic, little kind of one-off series. So there's this one called Renaissance of Raven, and that's going to be a fantasy. None of these really interest me. I mean, I might read the Batman Hush, but I already could read it anywhere else. So I don't know. But if you're interested in these, like on the go digital, like web mobile comic format that they're coming out with, this is going to be exclusively on DC Universe Infinite. The next thing I want to talk about is Absolute Batman #1. That's been super popular. It's been so popular, in fact, that it's getting a third printing, which is, I mean, it's definitely not unprecedented, but it's kind of crazy that both the first and second printings have sold out already, especially considering I saw a lot of people just kind of hating on this series, at least online on like Twitter and stuff when it first came out. So I'm kind of surprised. But anyway, I honestly haven't gotten my hands on this yet, unfortunately. I don't know if I'm going to be able to find a first printing, so I might have to wait until this third printing here. But it comes with a new variant cover by Nick Dragotta, who does the art for the actual comic, the actual book, and this third printing is coming out on November 27th. So that's pretty cool. Like I said, I haven't gotten my hands on it yet, so I might have to wait for this third printing. We'll see. Yeah, next piece of news is DC has made a deal with Global Comics and announced a partnership. This is according to MSN.com. But it's been in a lot of other news sources. But for a long time, Global Comics had other publishers that weren't quite as huge as DC. But now they've officially partnered with DC, and according to Global Comics CEO Christopher Carter, he said DC is responsible for some of the most respected and revered pop culture icons, and we are thrilled to offer hundreds of their iconic stories to our readers across the globe. With 400 books totaling approximately 75,000 pages, DC and DC Vertigo fans will have a wealth of content at their fingertips. And then over 100 DC series will be available on the platform with new rotating selections available quarterly. So Global Comics on their platform, there is a mix of comics that are free to read and comics that need a subscription for, but the fact that there are some free ones. It's pretty cool, and it looks like there are some DC titles that are already on their platform right now. Just well, let me just share this right here. If you're watching the video version, they've already got the Batman: The Long Halloween, All Star Superman, the Batman 3 Jokers, Watchmen, Nice House on the Lake, a bunch of those things. So look, honestly, like a lot of the main. Oh, they got the Sandman. Just a lot of the main DC titles are already on there, and it looks like they're there for free. I just clicked on the Watchmen one, and it looks like that one's just available to read for free. So pretty badass. So yeah, that's pretty cool. If you want to read some DC comics for free, really cool partnership there that they're starting up. So for some Marvel news, first off, we have this announcement of J. Michael Straczynski writing these six one shots that are going to be these little pairings between these unlikely characters. It's going to be beginning in January 2025, but the team up, the one shots are going to be Doctor Doom and Rocket Raccoon, Hulk and Doctor Strange, Captain America and Volstagg, Ghost Rider versus Galactus, which sounds crazy. Nick Fury versus Fin Fang Foom, again, kind of a uneven matchup there. And then Spider Man versus Doctor Octopus, which I'm kind of surprised because all the other matchups seem, you know, unexpected, but Spider-Man versus Doctor Octopus, there's got to be some sort of twist, right? Because obviously Doctor Octopus is Spider-Man's like arch nemesis, so that's not really a surprise there. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, J. Michael Straczynski's a good writer. I don't know if I'm gonna check these out or not, but yeah, it could be cool. Well, I guess time will tell. Now the next announcement from Marvel is the Rise of Emperor Doom #1. So this is going to be a 5-issue event series, The Rise of Emperor Doom, and it's going to launch this big overarching narrative, One World Under Doom, that's coming up next year. Obviously casting Doctor Doom as the main villain of this. But this series shows the rise of Doctor Doom basically taking over the world after becoming Sorcerer Supreme after the events of Bloodhunt. And yeah, it's going to show him, kind of taking over the world while the rest of the world's heroes try to stop him. This is going to be written by Ryan North with art by R.B. Silva, and issue 1 comes out in February 12th of 2025, next year. Now, last comic news I had was the introduction of Ultimate Wolverine to this new Ultimate Comic universe. Now, if you've been paying attention to the Ultimate Comics recently, things are vastly different in this universe, and the Maker has taken over everything and just changed everything in his favor. Some of the members of his council are Ilyana and Pyotr Rasputin, also known as Magic or in Colossus, as well as Omega Red, and they like control part the eastern like Russian side of the country, or not the country, but the world. And apparently, their secret weapon is the Winter Soldier, aka Wolverine. So it seems like this version of Wolverine seems like it's Logan, but it's not 100% confirmed. But it seems like he's going to be an assassin for Magic, Colossus, and Omega Red, which is definitely an interesting take. I'm actually really looking forward to this series because, I mean, I always love me some Wolverine, but also I've been really loving pretty much all of the Ultimate comics, like the new ones. I think they're a really interesting, fresh take on these characters, and I think this is a really new like take on Wolverine to make him the Winter Soldier. I'm not sure if it's like a Weapon X type situation where he's like brainwashed or what, but that's going to be very interesting to see. This series is going to be written by Chris Condon with art by Alessandro Capuccio, and he's actually been doing the recent Moon Knight and Vengeance of the Moon Knight runs with Jed MacKay. So he's a really good artist. So I'm looking forward to see his art in these books. So this Ultimate Wolverine is going to make his first appearance in Ultimate Universe 1 Year in #1, which is going to be a one-shot special comic that's coming out on December 11th, written by Denise Camp. And then obviously he'll next show up in his own series, which is coming out on January 15th. Issue 1 is coming out January 15th. So that looks very cool to me. Hopefully it's good. I mean, the rest of this has all been great. I haven't loved Ultimate X-Men. I think it's been interesting-ish, but it's just kind of not my cup of tea, and I haven't really been introducing any of the interesting X-Men in my opinion. But I've loved Ultimate Spider-Man, Ultimate Black Panther, the Ultimates, the Ultimate Universe one-shots. So, yeah, the I'm very much looking forward to this. Give me more Ultimate stuff. It's honestly some of the most interesting stuff coming out of Marvel lately. So, to definitely give the new Ultimate Universe a try if you haven't already. But yeah, enough blabber on about the news. Let's get into the actual book here, Predator versus Wolverine. Now, this is a very interesting crossover. It very much like it doesn't really make clear if any of this is canon or not, but it's most likely not canon. I don't know, but it's basically one of the first crossovers that Marvel has done with the whole like Fox uh with the acquisition of all the rights to the Fox movies and IP like Predator and Alien. They started doing an Alien series a couple years ago and some Predator stuff, and now they've done some crossovers. Like some other crossovers they've done recently is Predator versus Black Panther and Alien versus Avengers. So this is like the one that started it all, as far as I'm aware. And this came out last year, but obviously I'm going to get into like the summary here. I'm going to give a little more like casual, less information dense summary of this book, so it's a little easier to listen to, I think. If you're watching this on YouTube, let me know in the comments if you prefer this compared to what I usually do, which is more of like a more detailed breakdown and all that. But yeah, let's get into like the actual info about this book. So, Predator versus Wolverine. This is written by Benjamin Percy, who's done a ton of other Wolverine books. And art, there's a lot of different artists in this because there's a lot of different flashbacks throughout time, and each era has a different artist. So there's a lot of different artists in this book. So there's Greg Land, Ken Lashley, Andrea DeVito, Hayden Sherman, Kai Zama, and Gavin Guidry. And then the anchors are a lot of the same artists: Ken Lashley, Jay Leaston, Andrea DeVito, Hayden Sherman, Kai Zama, and Gavin Guidry. And then the colorists are Frank Diarmata, Juan Fernandez, Alex Gomez, and Matthew Wilson. And the letterer is VC's Corey Petit. And these comics were released 1 through 4 as single issues, September through December of 2023. So pretty much exactly a year ago. But yeah, let's get into the book here. So, what's really interesting and cool about this book is it's basically like Wolverine and the Predator. Like, oh, also spoilers. Okay, if you're planning on reading this and don't want spoilers, this is going to be very heavy spoiler territory. So just so you're warned. But anyway, this book is really cool because it's basically Wolverine and Predator like having a lot of these different encounters over centuries, like basically as Predator is or as Wolverine is growing and getting older, so is the Predator that keeps like coming after him. And it's really cool, but I'll discuss more what I like about it later. But so the book starts out. Wolverine has obviously had an encounter with the Predators. He's very very badly injured, but we know he's got a healing factor, so it's all okay. But the Predator is stalking him, hunting him with his infrared mask. And so Wolverine finds this cliff to hide under, and then we see a flashback to when Wolverine first met the Predator, and this was way back when Wolverine was young. This was around the year 1900 in the Alaska territories, and Wolverine is just kind of being a loner off by himself, and he travels into town. He gets hired by this guy who says his daughter's been kidnapped, and he asks Logan to help him get his daughter back. So meanwhile, we see the Predator, who just like arrived to Earth. He's pretty young. He's obviously kind of a adolescent Predator, and he's slowly working his way up the animal food chain, just kind of killing whatever comes across his path. And then as Wolverine and the father that hired him make their way to the kidnappers, they see a bunch of animals, including humans, that have been skinned and strung up by the Predator. So Wolverine makes it to the cabin, kills the kidnappers, but then he gets betrayed. But the guy who hired him, it turns out that there was no daughter. They weren't kidnappers. They were all just part of his criminal gang, and he just wanted them gone so we didn't have to split the profits. But then that guy's killed by the Predator, who then tries to kill Logan, but obviously Logan's got a healing factor and doesn't go down very easy. So the two of them fight, and they both injure each other pretty badly, but Wolverine's able to bring the Predator outside and bring him to this bear den where a bear attacks the Predator, and Wolverine thinks that's it, thinks it's the end of him, but the Predator actually kills the bear and keeps his head as a trophy. So many years later, we see Wolverine, and he's in part of Team X, along with Maverick, Sabretooth, and some other agents. And as they're on a mission into South America, they get attacked by the Predator, who's come with several other Predator buddies, and things are it's gonna heat up pretty quick. But then we go back to modern day. There is a lot of going back and forth between the present and the past in this book, so just so you're forewarned. But the Predator sends out a bunch of these like laser seeking drones that flush Wolverine out, and he falls into a river and gets pinned by rubble and starts to drown. And while he's drowning, he has more flashbacks. And we go back to the Team X fight with the Predators, and Wolverine and Maverick are actually able to fight off a lot of the Predators and hide in this bunker where they meet this warlord and his soldiers that they were hired to take out, but they also see that they've got a bunch of explosives, so they all band together and lure the remaining Predators into the bunker, and then they set all the dynamite to explode, and they all get away. I mean, all of the non-Predator people get away, and Wolverine thinks that's the last of the Predator, but we see a hand coming out of the rubble. The Predator is obviously still alive. So then soon after that, we see that the Predator breaks into the Weapon X facility, and he goes and sees Logan as he's being all messed up and having his memories erased and all the terrible things that Weapon X did to him, Professor Thornton did to him. So then back to the present, Wolverine's able to get away from the rubble and escape from the Predator, who's unable to track him. Then we go back to the Weapon X thing, and as Wolverine's just kind of hanging out, he's just sitting on this or laying on this experimental table or whatever, and the Predator starts to like kind of take him apart and see what makes him tick, and he sees that he's got this cool adamantium skeleton, which he obviously wants to add to his collection, but Wolverine wakes up and attacks the Predator, but the Predator is able to subdue him, and he puts that like acid stuff on his face, which melts all of the skin and organic tissue off of his skull, so it's basically just his adamantium skull underneath. So the Predator drags Wolverine's supposed corpse. He thinks he's the Predator thinks he's dead, drags him back to his ship and tends to his wounds, but Wolverine soon starts to heal, and he breaks his way out of the ship as it's going into orbit, and he manages to knock the Predator's mask off, which falls to Earth along with him. And Professor Thornton is able to find Wolverine's corpse, or not corpse, he's healing. Professor Thornton also finds the Predator's mask, which he uses to adapt the technology to make the Weapon X like helmet that we're so used to seeing Wolverine in. It's kind of a classic look. And then we do another flash forward to Wolverine's time in Japan, and he's training with this swordsman named Muramasa, who's trying to teach him not to rely on his claws, but to be able to use his sword skills to defend himself. And just then the Predator shows up, but this time he's made a mask out of the bear skull he killed decades before. We see another flashback, which this is slightly before the start of this whole series, and we see Wolverine taking the helmet that he knocked off of the Predator in the first place, and he had broken into the remains of the old Weapon X facility, and he found it and kind of like reactivated it and set it as a trap because he thought the Predator would come for it. And the Predator does, and the fight ensues, but then Wolverine, gets injured, and this kind of brings us to where the story began. So going back to the Japanese part, Wolverine fights the Predator, but he only uses his katana instead of popping his claws. But then the hand shows up and chases off the Predator, and we kind of don't really see what happens with the hand. It just kind of skips over to the next part of the story, where this is several decades later. Wolverine's one of the X-Men at this point, and the Predator finds him again, but this time he attacks the X-Mansion. Wolverine and Nightcrawler are able to save pretty much everybody in the mansion, except for Rogue, with who the Predator takes captive and threatens her life. So Wolverine sacrifices himself and agrees to be handcuffed and taken with the Predator to be his trophy. But as the Predator brings Wolverine to his ship, Wolverine attacks him, and it turns out that the Wolverine the Predator thought was Wolverine, that he had all handcuffed up, was actually Danny Moonstar, using her like reality warping powers to look like Logan. So Wolverine and the rest of the X-Men are able to beat the Predator and kind of whoop his ass. Honestly, this kind of given the costumes and everything, this seems to be like the era that took place in like the 80s. X-Men. If you're watching the video version, we see like an older Shadow Cat costume, and even Rogue's costume is kind of older. She doesn't really wear that one anymore. And Danny Moonstar has like her New Mutants costume. But anyway, so they beat the shit out of the Predator, and he goes whimpering back to his ship. A little like several years later, Wolverine, sets that trap with the helmet. They're not really specific or clear about when exactly this all takes place and everything. But so back to the present fight. The Predator sees Logan's eyeball poking out of some mud. He thinks he's hiding in the mud, when in fact it's just Wolverine's eye, and he had gouted it out of himself and put it in the mud to trick him. And so he jumps onto the Predator's back and starts slashing him up. And they fight a little bit, but the Predator knows he's dying, because Wolverine pretty mortally wounded him. So he activates his, wrist bomb thing that we've seen in all the movies, and it goes off. But Wolverine obviously survives. He can survive almost anything. And yeah, so pretty much how the story ends, Wolverine, he feels kind of an emptiness knowing that the Predator isn't going to be like coming after him anymore, and he won't really have the thrill of the hunt anymore. But he is able to keep the Predator's knife as kind of a trophy, and that's how this ends. But yeah, I thought this was really cool. I think the my really only gripe with this is how vague the timeline is. It just kind of like the only time they ever said a year was in the beginning, when it said like circa 1900, was when the Predator went after Wolverine in the Alaska territories. All the other times, if you like really go back and like look at when if you have a good handle of the timeline of Wolverine and the X-Men, and like when those things were published and all that stuff, you kind of have an idea. But it's also not one to one, because the comics don't necessarily take place in the same year that came out. Like the 1985 X-Men, like it hasn't in the timeline, it hasn't been 40 years since that happened. So like Rogue isn't freaking 60 years old in the comics. So it's kind of hard to tell what the actual timeline is. Like, I guess that might be why, because of those issues. But you get a vague idea of the timeline if you're familiar, and it is pretty linear. Like, it does, besides the flashing to the present and the past, it does stay pretty constant, a linear timeline of the different interactions between Predator and Wolverine. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. I think pitting Predator versus Wolverine has been something fans have been doing for a long time. There's even been a Bat in the Sun, like showdown or whatever those videos were. Like came out like 10 or 12 years ago, and it's kind of been something that hasn't really been a legitimate reality up until now, when Disney bought the rights to the Fox IP. So now they've been able to make kind of canon, at least official crossovers, which I think is really cool. So I think this is kind of one of the most perfect crossovers you can have, because these, obviously you have the Predator, and then you have Wolverine, who in and of himself, like, besides Craven, is kind of the most predatorial and like most hunter like Marvel character there is. So to pit him against the Predator, I think works really well. I think something that they did really well in this book is they didn't just make it like a slugging match of like, who's gonna slash who the hardest. I think they did a really good job making the two characters like really, it was really kind of a battle of wits, more in like strategy and hunting prowess than it was just like, a brawn type thing, or, just like a powers thing. Cause like it's kind of not fair because Wolverine can like heal from pretty much anything, but Predator still put up a really good fight because of like how many cool, great gadgets he has and how good of a hunter he is, and, stuff like that. So I think that was all very cool and kept it interesting. And I really, really liked the whole concept of Predator and Wolverine meeting over several years, like over a century. And I just thought that was really cool, and it really lent to just the way the story was so gripping, I think. And I think they did a really good job. I think it was cool that they used specific like major events in Wolverine's life. It wasn't just like, oh, when he was around in the 70s. Oh, because like they actually used when he was in Team X, when he was part of the Weapon X program, when he spent time in Japan, stuff like that. I really liked that they chose major events, and I thought it was cool how they intertwined the Predator into those eras of Wolverine. Like they even had Professor Thornton use the Predator's mask as the basis of Wolverine's like Weapon X helmet. I thought that was really interesting. Honestly, even though I don't think this is technically canon, I think it could work in the canon. Like obviously there's a lot of retcons, but I feel like it could work. And I think it would be kind of cool if they explored this more. Because it was just kind of like that one predator throughout the whole time, and there's obviously a lot of predators. Um, it would be kind of I kind of would have liked to see something like what they did in Predator 2, where in the end, they kind of showed the Danny Glover character, some respect because he killed one of the predators. In this, it was just like this predator really wanted to kill Wolverine and he was going to take him out no matter what, but he obviously failed in the end. It would have been kind of cool to see like Wolverine get some respect from some other predators maybe, for being able to take down one of them, but I don't know. I think it was also interesting that it took so many years to take down a predator because normally, in the predator movies, it's basically like, oh, they try to kill the human, but they don't. In this, it obviously took Wolverine a long time, even though he's probably the most formidable enemy out of any of the other predator media. But there wouldn't really be a story if he just killed him in one go. And I think, like I said, it does make it interesting to have it span over several years. And also, it kind of could be that this predator was just kind of so good. Like we aren't really sure what level all these predators are in the other, in the movies. Like, are we seeing, young predators? Like in this, it starts out as a young predator, and then as it grows older, it gets more and more experience. And but then so does Wolverine, and they kind of grow together in a weird like rivalistic way. It's kind of interesting. I thought it was very cool. There were aspects of this that reminded me a bit of some of the movies as well, especially Prey. I think the part of Prey where the predator is going around like kind of working his way up the food chain, starting with like a snake and then killing like a wolf and stuff like that. They kind of did that in this comic, and I thought that was really cool. I think in this comic, I didn't show it on the screen, but I think he even kills a whale at one point, which is kind of crazy. But then there is that one part in the comic where a bear attacks the predator, and there is a specific scene in Prey where the predator kills a bear. So I definitely saw a parallel there. But yeah, all in all, I really enjoyed this. It's kind of hard for me to rate this. I mean, if I was gonna rate this, I'd honestly probably give it like, I don't know. This may seem kind of high, but I think I might give it an 8. Obviously it's not as impactful as a lot of other stories, but it's written really well. It's super gripping. The art's really cool. The way they change the art style is really cool. It's a very simple but well executed story. I thought it was really good. Yeah, so I would definitely check it out. If my summary was enough to get you enticed to actually read it yourself. I will leave a link to the Amazon graphic novel in the description. But yeah, before I wrap things up, I want to talk about my cultured picks for this week. So first off, this both these books I'm going to talk about came out a couple months ago, but I want to talk about Alien versus Avengers. I was looking forward to this for a while, ever since I heard it was announced, because Jonathan Hickman is writing it. Hickman's awesome. I really like his work. And, obviously it's Aliens. I'm a huge fan of Aliens, and having them have a big crossover with the Avengers sounded awesome. So this doesn't go the way I expected, which I guess I should have expected. This reminds me a lot of Chip Zdarsky's Avengers Twilight, where it kind of makes the way it's promoted, it seems like it's going to take place in the modern day, but spoilers, this takes place several decades in the future, where the aliens have all but taken over the planet, and it's very much dystopian world, and like the Avengers are kind of just like this last resistance against the xenomorphs. And I thought that was really interesting to see some older Avengers. It's definitely not, the most original thing, but the way they're doing it feels fresh. And there's just some really cool moments, like Hulk fighting a xenomorph and getting burned by the acid blood, which is just kind of badass. It's kind of like a matchup you only kind of dream of, Don't really expect it to actually happen in an official Marvel comic. And also, Miles Morales seems to be the main Spider-Man in this rendition, but we learn at the end that he's actually got a symbiote. His suit's the Venom symbiote, and it actually manages to attack a face hugger that attacked Miles and take it over and combine it with his suit. So now he's like got this face hugger Venom suit, and it's like, I don't know how it's gonna work, but it's pretty badass. So I'm definitely looking forward to the later issues. I'm not sure how many issues this is going to be. I think it's going to be probably like a 6-issue miniseries maybe. Now the next issue I wanted to talk about is Venomverse Reborn #1. I thought this was I wasn't really sure if I was gonna find this interesting or not, because it doesn't really tie into the main, or I didn't expect it to tie into the main storyline of what's going on with Venom and like Venom War and all that stuff very much. But it's basically like the King in Black, but like the eventuality, I think is what he's called. He's like the ultimate, like furthest down the line, furthest down the timeline King in Black, Eddie Brock. And he's explaining to the reader. I'm not really sure who the reader is. I think it's been suggested that it's Dylan Brock, but he's basically explained. He's answering questions that the reader is asking, and showing all these different alternate universe versions of Venom. And at first I was like, who cares? But after reading this issue, I really thought it was pretty cool. So the first issue starts out, we actually get to see the Spider-Man 2, like the PlayStation Spider-Man 2 version of Venom, which is Harry Osborn. And I think it was just kind of cool. I always think it's kind of cool when they bring in other media versions of a character into the comics. Even if it doesn't make a whole lot of sense continuity-wise, I think it's kind of cool. So it shows this version of Venom, but then Null brings Venom into the 616 timeline and tries to recruit him. But Venom says no. But I just thought this whole interaction was very cool, seeing him interact with Null. And they do have like this convenient way of Null wiping his memory, so there's no like questions why in the game Venom was never like, I wonder who that Null guy was. But I think it is interesting because in the game there is a lot of like King in Black and Absolute Carnage imagery in Spider-Man 2. Like all of the symbiotes have the like swirly design on their heads. So I think it's interesting to kind of show this Venom meeting a version of Null, as they kind of teased Null in a way in the Spider-Man 2 game. Another thing that was kind of cool that this Venomverse showed, I think this is like issue 3, not issue 1, but they show a Venom Xenomorph Queen, looks like, which is kind of cool. Another, nod to or another like crossover with the Alien franchise. So yeah, I thought those were very cool. I'm kind of a sucker for cool, badass crossovers like that. So I found that pretty fun. But yeah, that's the episode this week. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. And if you'd like to help support us, you can check us out on patreon.com/theculturednerd and look for the Cultured Pull List tier. And a big thanks to all of the current Cultured Nerd Patreon supporters. As usual, I've been your host, Michael Malillo. All our visual assets were designed by Jose Navarro. Thank you once again for joining us. If you'd like to check out The Cultured Nerd on social media or The Cultured Pull List on Instagram, you can scan the QR code on the bottom left. And if you want to check out Casual Experts, which is my personal brand I do with Luke, you can check out our social media or our podcasts by scanning the QR code on the bottom right. Once again, thank you for joining me. I'll see you next time.